4 officers rode into the fog on October 9th, 1918, and were never seen again. No bodies, no gunfire, no evidence. Their horses returned before dawn, reins cut clean, badges missing. The town buried the reports and called it an accident. 100 years later, the files surface again, and so does something that was supposed to stay buried. If unsolved mysteries and true crime hauntings like this draw you in, hit subscribe and join the investigation. The archive room of the Harper County courthouse was never meant to outlive the war. It smelled of varnish, old tobacco, and paper softened by decades of humidity. Dr. Lena Rourke had spent the afternoon cataloging casualty reports for her university's project on Texas law enforcement during the influenza years, telling herself it was only history when she found it, a box with no label, only a pencil-scrawled word, officers. Inside lay 4 faded arrest reports dated October 1918. Each bore a signature that ended abruptly halfway through the page. Pinned beside them was a dispatch order from the sheriff's office. Patrol assigned to intercept train robbers, Route 17, midnight. Return expected by 0300. There was no return entry. Lena turned the brittle paper over. A handwritten note in a different ink ran along the margin. Do not reopen, 1946. The handwriting shook slightly, as though the writer had been afraid to touch the words even then. She sat back, aware of the courthouse clock striking 5 above her. Outside, the last of the daylight burned through dust on the window glass. 4 names caught the glow: Deputy Walter Finch, Deputy Raymond Cobb, Sergeant Ira Lee, Sheriff Thomas Harrow. 4 men who rode into a storm of history and vanished between the rails. Lena didn't know it yet, but by the time she finished tracing their steps, the ground beneath Harper County would shift again. The highway followed the same path the railway once had, a thin silver thread through scrubland and pale grass, curving toward the Brazos like a scar that never healed. Lena's rental car hummed quietly in the afternoon heat. The GPS flickered, searching for a signal she'd left Austin before dawn, chasing a rumor that Harper County's last surviving witness still lived on the edge of what used to be Route 17. By the time she reached the turnoff, the landscape had flattened into endless horizon. Telephone poles leaned like weary sentinels. Every few miles, a fence post bore a rusted sheriff's star nailed through its center, the county's unofficial memorial. At the small general store near the county line, she met him. Elmer Cobb, 97, skin the color of parchment, eyes sharp behind cataract clouds. He sat on the porch with a blanket over his knees and a thermos of coffee that steamed even in the heat. "You're the one digging up the boys again," he said without question. "I'm a historian," Lena replied. "I'm trying to understand what happened to them." He laughed, dry as paper. "Understanding something ain't the same as making it leave you alone." She asked if he remembered the night. He nodded toward the western hills. October 9th. The air smelled like copper. Mama said it was the influenza coming through the air. But my uncle, he said it was the train, said he heard it whistling when the tracks were already gone. Lena frowned. The train had stopped running by then. "That's what I mean," Elmer said. "Something came anyway." He told her the story the county had long tried to forget. How Sheriff Harrow and his men rode out to arrest a group of deserters hiding near the old freight tunnel. How thunder rolled across clear skies. How by morning their horses returned alone, saddles torn, eyes wild. "No gunshots, no bodies," he said. "Just prints in the mud that stopped half a mile from the tunnel like they walked into thin air." Lena felt the desert heat tighten around her. She asked what happened to the investigation. "Investigation?" Elmer's smile thinned. "They buried it faster than they buried the sheriff's badge. County judge ordered silence. Said the war was ending and we didn't need more ghosts." He sipped from his thermos, hand trembling slightly. "Want to know something else?" he said. "That tunnel, it ain't on any map no more. They filled it in after the flood of '46. But when the river's low, you can still hear the rails. That night, Lena checked into the only motel in town, a single-story strip lit by flickering neon. She laid the old reports across the bedspread. Each page carried a faint watermark of mud. At 11:47 p.m., a distant sound reached her through the open window, low, rhythmic, metallic, like a train wheel on broken track. She thought it must be wind, until she heard it again. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The same pattern written at the bottom of one of the 1918 reports. A Morse code fragment. When she decoded it, it spelled one word: help. The room's clock clicked over to midnight, and outside, somewhere down the old highway, a single light moved across the horizon, slow, deliberate, impossibly steady. The morning light over Harper County had that peculiar pale stillness found only in places where memory lingers longer than people. Lena woke before dawn, the whisper of the train sound still echoing somewhere behind her ribs. Coffee scalded her tongue as she replayed the recording from her phone. The audio app had picked up faint metal percussion. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again. Too regular to be wind. She listened 6 times, each repetition colder than the last. By 7 a.m., she was at the County Historical Society. The building was a converted chapel, its pews replaced with filing cabinets. Behind the desk sat a woman in her 60s wearing a sheriff's auxiliary pin. "Morning," the woman said. "You're the professor from Austin?" "Trying to be," Lena answered. "I'm looking for property records from the flood of 1946. I need to find where the freight tunnel used to be." The woman hesitated, fingers hovering above her keyboard. "We don't lend those out. County sealed them after certain complaints." Complaints? Families who didn't like their land being associated with ghosts. When Lena pressed, the woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Try the church records instead. The old St. Jude's mission kept maps before the flood. They had to, because the parish graveyard washed out." She pointed to a narrow dirt road on a laminated county map. "Follow this until you see the stone bridge. The mission's just past that, though no one's preached there since the 60s. The drive took 20 minutes, dust curled behind her like smoke. The bridge appeared without warning, a single arch of limestone spanning a dry riverbed. Beyond it, the mission slouched against a stand of willows. Its bell tower collapsed inward like a broken throat. Lena parked beside the overgrown path. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was clear. Inside, the mission was half ruin, half reliquary. Pews sunken into earth, hymnals fused with mold. On the altar lay a scatter of yellowed paper wrapped in twine. She cut the twine with her keys and spread the papers across a pew. Hand-drawn topographical lines, the faint ink of 1910 surveyors. At the bottom corner, barely legible, the words "Maintenance Access, Tunnel 3B, Disused." The map placed the tunnel entrance less than half a mile from where the officers vanished beneath the river. She took photographs, folded the map carefully, and turned to leave. A noise stopped her. Metal striking metal. Soft, distant, rhythmical. The same 3 beats. Her eyes darted toward the bell tower. The wind had begun to move through the hollow arch where the bell once hung. But this sound came from below, muffled by earth. She stepped outside, following it toward the riverbed. The soil there had split open from years of drought. Between cracks, water glimmered. She crouched, brushing away mud until her hand met something cold. Iron. A rusted rail, half buried. As she traced it with her fingertips, the ground trembled faintly. Then came the whistle. Not loud, not even clear. Just a low sigh of pressure and distance, rising through the dry river like an exhalation. She stumbled back, heart racing. No train could run here. The tracks had been removed almost a century ago. When the sound faded, she noticed something else. Fresh footprints in the mud. 2 sets, one her own and another, smaller, leading away toward the trees. She followed. The prints stopped at a shallow pool formed where the river once bent. At its center lay a single object, a badge, half submerged, its metal darkened with silt. She lifted it carefully, wiping the surface with her sleeve. The engraving was faint but legible. Deputy R. Cobb, Harper County Sheriff's Department, 1918. Her breath caught. Cobb, the same name as the old man she'd interviewed yesterday. She photographed the badge, then drove straight back to the general store. The porch was empty. The thermos, the blanket, gone. Inside, the clerk shook his head when she asked, "Elmer Cobb passed 3 years ago, ma'am. Stroke. You must have talked to someone else." Lena stared at him, unable to speak. Her phone still held the time-stamped recording of their conversation from the day before. She replayed it. The clerk leaned closer, listening. On the recording, her own voice asked, "You remember that night?" And the reply came, soft and rasping. "October 9th. The air smelled like copper. Then silence. The clerk's face had gone pale. "Ma'am, that's his voice, but that can't be." Lena stepped outside, dizzy with the dry heat. Across the road, dust spiraled upward as though stirred by unseen wheels. From far away, faint and steady, came the sound again. 3 beats. Pause. 3, and underneath it, almost masked by wind, something like a human breath whispering her name. The motel room smelled faintly of rain and old fabric. Lena laid the badge on the dresser under the lamplight, its edges catching a dull shimmer. The engraved number, barely visible beneath corrosion, was 1241. She typed it into the county archives search bar. Nothing came up. She tried again through state records, digging through scanned microfilm. The only reference she found was a half-page obituary dated October 30th, 1918. Deputy Raymond Cobb, missing, presumed dead. Survived by his wife Margaret and an infant son, Elmer. She sat back, her pulse quickened. The man she'd spoken to, the voice on the recording, wasn't just related to one of the missing, he was one of them. At 2 a.m., the power flickered. Her laptop screen dimmed to black, then came alive again. The cursor blinked across an empty document. For a moment, nothing moved. Then letters began appearing one by one. "Have you seen them?" Her breath froze. She reached for the power button, but another line appeared. "Not yet midnight." The cursor blinked twice, then stopped. The room went dark. She shut the laptop, heart hammering. Outside, the wind dragged across the highway like a slow breath. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote wailed. A sound that rose and broke apart into echoes that almost formed words. When morning came, she drove to the sheriff's office. The building was newer, concrete and glass, but a framed photograph on the wall stopped her cold. 4 men in uniform, standing beside horses, a dark ridge of hills behind them. The plaque read, Harper County Sheriff's Department, 1918, duty above fear. The receptionist noticed her staring. "Those the ones you're researching? We get ghost hunters here every couple years." "I'm not a ghost hunter," Lena said quietly. "I'm a historian." The woman smiled politely, the way small-town clerks smile when they've heard something unbelievable before. A deputy in his 50s emerged from an office. His badge caught the light. "Dr. Rourke, right?" he asked. "Heard you were poking around old files. I'm trying to locate reports from the disappearance in 1918. You won't find much county records burned in a courthouse fire back in the 40s. She hesitated. "But some survived. I found 4 arrest reports." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so? Mind if I see one?" She showed him photos from her phone. His expression changed, something between disbelief and caution. Where'd you get these? From a box in the courthouse archive. He nodded slowly. You ever heard of the Harper Mile? She shook her head. That's what locals call the stretch of road between here and the river. They say if you drive it after midnight, you see lanterns moving through the fog. Some claim they're the 4 deputies coming back. He leaned back in his chair. My grandfather told me they weren't chasing robbers that night. Said they were bringing in one of their own. The sheriff. Thomas Harrow? Yeah. Rumor was he'd gone wrong after his wife died. Started seeing things preaching about a train that ran beneath the river. Folks thought he was touched. The others went to stop him before he hurt somebody. Lena's pen froze over her notebook. Did they find any of them? Not a soul, he said. Only their horses and one badge floating in the floodwater. She stared at him. Whose badge? He shrugged. Never said in the reports. County ordered the case sealed. When she left the station, the air had thickened with heat. Storm clouds were gathering over the ridge. She drove until she reached the spot where the old tracks once crossed the river. Now just a barren gash in the land, carved deep and dark. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. She stepped out of the car. Mud sucked at her boots. The smell of iron rose from the ground. As she approached the riverbed, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from below, a subterranean growl that made the earth tremble. The same 3 beats echoed, louder this time, each vibration rising through her legs, her chest, her skull. The storm broke open. Lightning flared white across the ridge, and for a fraction of a second she saw them. 4 silhouettes standing on the far bank, motionless, soaked in silver light. When she blinked, they were gone. Only the sound remained. 3 beats, pause, 3. And then beneath it, faint but unmistakable, a human voice, carried on the wind. Not yet midnight. The rain had passed by dawn, leaving Harper County rinsed and glimmering. Mist clung to the pastures, thin and gray, as if the world had been half erased overnight. Lena sat at the small motel desk, hair damp from the shower, staring at the photographs she'd taken. The badge, the map, the 4 men standing beside their horses. She'd printed them all on the motel's ancient inkjet, the colors bleeding faintly at the edges. She couldn't shake the image from the storm. The 4 shapes across the river. Whether they'd been men or reflections or tricks of lightning, she didn't know. She only knew she needed to go deeper. The county library sat in what had once been the post office, its marble floors etched with the weight of a century. In the archives room, a young librarian guided her to the local history shelves. If there's anything left from that era, the woman said, it'll be in the personal donations section. Farmers, preachers, soldiers, people who kept journals. Lena spent the morning reading diaries of influenza victims and ranch ledgers. Then, around noon, she found it, wedged between a Civil War memoir and a volume of poetry. The spine read, H. Thomas Harrow, 1917 to 1918. Private. She turned the cover. The first pages were lists of arrests, fines, notations about weather, but the later entries grew erratic, the handwriting looser, like someone writing in darkness. July 6th, 1918. Heard the whistle again tonight. Not from the tracks. Those were pulled last year. The sound came from under the river. The men say I imagine it, but the air moves different when it passes smells of coal and something older. August 2nd. Dreamt of the tunnel. Woke to find mud under my nails. I don't remember leaving the house. September 11th. There are lights beneath the water now. Finch saw them too. Said they looked like lanterns, carried by men who forgot they were dead. October 9th. The others ride with me tonight. I told them it's deserters hiding in the old tunnel. But that's not true. The sound is calling louder. It knows my name now. Lena closed the book, her pulse unsteady. At the back of the journal, A folded newspaper clipping was tucked into an envelope. Its headline read, "Unscheduled train carries medical supplies to Camp Logan. Route classified." The date, October 8th, 1918. One day before the men vanished. She photographed each page, then returned the journal to its shelf. As she reached the door, she noticed the librarian watching her. "You found something, didn't you?" the woman asked softly. "Maybe," Lena said. "Did you know about Sheriff Harrow's wife?" The librarian nodded. "She died of the fever that summer. Some folks say he was never the same. Others say she still walks the ridge looking for him." Outside, the clouds had thickened again. The air pressed heavy on her skin. She drove toward the ridge, following the dirt road that wound through mesquite and cedar until the trees opened onto a field of sun-bleached grass. There, half buried, stood the remnants of a house. Its roof collapsed, porch sinking into soil. This had to be Harrow's property. Inside, she found relics of a life abandoned. A child's shoe, a cracked mirror, the warped frame of a bed. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing layers of older paper beneath. Flowers, then stars, then crosses drawn in graphite. On the dresser lay a photograph. A woman in a lace collar, eyes steady, mouth faintly smiling. On the back, someone had written, "Anna, before the sickness." Lena placed it carefully in her notebook. From the corner of the room came a sound, soft, deliberate, like a hand brushing fabric. She turned. The mirror on the wall vibrated faintly. Though the air was still beneath the dust, she saw her reflection shimmer, then blur. For a heartbeat, another face appeared beside hers. A man's, pale, hollow-eyed, lips parted as if to speak. She stumbled back. The glass cracked down the center with a sharp, dry pop. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the low metallic rhythm she'd begun to dread. 3 beats. Pause. 3. Lena fled the house and didn't stop until she reached the car. From the ridge, she looked back. The broken mirror in the window caught a flash of light, as though reflecting something moving deep underground. When she started the engine, the dashboard clock flickered, then reset to 12 o'clock, midnight, even though the sun still hung high over the fields. The heat returned the next day with punishing clarity. The sky was a lid of pewter, the air thick enough to taste. Lena's head throbbed from lack of sleep, her mind still replaying the moment when the mirror fractured. She spent the morning in her car, parked outside a diner on Main Street, rereading Harrow's journal entries. The dates, the mention of a classified route, the sudden shift in his language. It all pointed to something physical, something buried. She searched digital archives for any mention of an unscheduled train near Harper County in October 1918. The result came not from Texas records, but a declassified Army logistics report from Camp Logan, dated weeks before the armistice. Temporary medical line approved for transport of biocontainment materials and non-combatant casualties rail access. Harper Junction to Riverbend Tunnel. Strict confidentiality ordered. Biocontainment materials. The phrase felt less like logistics and more like a warning label stamped on an entire county. The influenza pandemic was at its peak in 1918. Could the train have carried infected bodies or experimental treatments? She printed the report and drove to Harper Junction, 10 miles south of town. The rail yard was long gone, replaced by a scrap yard filled with the skeletons of tractors and twisted rails. A man in a grease-stained cap watched her approach. "Looking for someone?" he asked. "I'm researching the old freight line," she said. "Do you know where the Riverbend Tunnel used to be?" The man spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Ain't much left of it. Flood took half the ridge, but the entrance used to sit right below the bluff by the river." "Can I get there?" He hesitated. "If you're willing to walk and don't mind snakes." She was. The path down from the bluff was narrow, lined with willow roots. The air grew cooler as she descended. The sound of insects faded until only the rustle of her boots and her heartbeat filled the silence. At the base of the hill she found it. A dark mouth carved into limestone, half filled with water, moss slicked the stone. A rusted sign lay fallen nearby, its lettering barely visible. U.S. Rail, Tunnel 3. B. The same designation from the map she'd found in the mission. Lena knelt at the edge. The water reflected her face in shifting fragments. Beneath the surface, something glimmered. Metal, curved. She reached down, fingers brushing cold steel. A whistle broke the silence, soft, low, coming from deep inside the tunnel. She froze. The water rippled outward from her hand. Then faintly, a second sound joined it, metal on metal, 3 beats, pause, 3. Her rational mind insisted it was echo. Old pipes, groundwater, temperature shift. But the part of her that had seen faces in mirrors, heard voices through recordings, knew better. She turned to leave, and stopped. Someone stood at the top of the ridge, a figure outlined by sunlight, unmoving. "Hello?" she called. No response. She raised a hand to shield her eyes. The figure lifted its arm in the same motion, as though mirroring her. For a moment she thought it was her reflection again. Then the figure stepped forward, and the light caught a glint of metal on its chest. A badge. Her throat closed. "Raymond," she whispered before she could stop herself. The wind shifted. The figure vanished. The air around her changed, colder, denser. The sound of the whistle faded into the rhythm she'd come to dread, steady as a heartbeat. 3 beats, pause, 3. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, screen lighting with an incoming message from an unknown number. "Stop digging." Another line appeared immediately after "not yet midnight." The phone shut off on its own. Lena ran up the hill, heart hammering, shoes slipping in the mud. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the keys twice. As she drove back toward town, the radio flickered on by itself. Static filled the speakers, then a man's voice, crackling, old-fashioned, as though transmitted across a century. "Sheriff Harrow. To base. We found the train. No engineer aboard. The doors are sealed." The signal dissolved into static. She pulled over, chest tight, staring at the radio. The timestamp on the screen read 12 a.m. Again, the same impossible hour. By the time Lena reached the motel, the sun was already collapsing into the hills. The radio's static still echoed in her ears, that fractured voice of Sheriff Harrow calling across time. She sat in the car long after the engine stopped, gripping the steering wheel. She didn't believe in hauntings, not exactly, but she believed in what trauma could do to a place, the way fear could soak into soil, into water, into memory. She decided to go back at dawn. That night, she barely slept. The ceiling fan clicked with each rotation like a clock missing its heartbeat. Every time her eyes drifted closed, she heard the whistle again. Low, patient, impossibly close. At 5:12 a.m., she gave up trying to rest. She filled her backpack with supplies, flashlight, camera, recorder, a flask of water. Before she left, she slipped the badge into her pocket. It felt wrong to leave it behind. The sky was the color of lead when she reached the ridge mist coiled between the cedars. The entrance to the tunnel yawned ahead, half hidden by weeds. She switched on her flashlight and stepped inside. The air was thick and cold, tasting faintly of rust and mold. Her light beam cut through dust motes that drifted like ash. The walls curved inward, lined with old stone and warped rail ties. A few steps in, the sound changed. Her footsteps no longer echoed. They were absorbed, muffled by something deeper. She found remnants of track beneath the silt, rails corroded but intact. Every few feet, fragments of wood protruded, splintered as if torn from the ground by force. A faded sign lay half buried in debris. She brushed away the dirt. Authorized personnel only. Property of the United States Army. Farther in, the tunnel widened. Water pooled near the center, reflecting her light in fractured ribbons. Then she saw the door. An iron slab embedded in the wall, its hinges welded shut. Across it were painted letters so eroded she could barely make them out. BIOCARGO, handle with care. She crouched closer. The metal bore deep scratches, as though someone, or something, had clawed to get out. Her recorder blinked red. Still running, she spoke softly. Location, Riverbend Tunnel. Evidence of sealed structure consistent with 1918 Army reports. Unknown modifications. A sudden noise cut her off. A hollow metallic clang, echoing from somewhere deeper inside. Then again, closer. 3 beats. Pause. 3. She froze, light trembling in her hand. The sound grew rhythmic, measured, deliberate, like boots on metal. "Hello?" Her voice came out too thin, swallowed by the dark. "Is someone there?" No answer. The beam of her flashlight caught something, a shape shifting just beyond the water's surface. She leaned forward. For an instant, a reflection appeared beside hers. A man's face, pale and dripping, eyes hollow, mouth moving soundlessly. Then the water rippled and the image shattered. Lena stumbled back. Her heel struck something solid. She turned her light downward, a boot. Half buried in the mud, leather decayed to the color of bone. Still inside it, the outline of toes turned to dust. She gagged, covering her mouth. Her heart pounded so hard the flashlight shook in her hand. From the recorder came static, then a voice. Not hers. "Harrow, open it. They're still inside." Then the whistle again, close enough to feel in her chest. She ran. The tunnel stretched on endlessly, every step echoing back in distorted rhythm. When she reached the entrance, sunlight broke across the ridge like salvation. She didn't stop until she was back at the car, lungs burning, hands streaked with mud. She played back the recorder. The tunnel's echoes filled the speakers, that same faint voice repeating in bursts between static, "Still inside, still inside," and then, almost inaudible, another whisper, "Not yet midnight." She looked at the badge in her hand. Water droplets still clung to the engraved letters under the bright morning sun. It felt colder than ever. By midday, the heat had turned brutal again. Lena drove back toward Austin, the recorder sitting on the passenger seat like evidence from a crime scene. She couldn't bring herself to play it again. The whisper looping in her mind was already too clear. She stopped at a diner off the highway, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and made a call to the only person who might help her decode what she'd captured. "Lena?" The voice on the other end sounded groggy. "You do realize it's Saturday? Daniel, I need a favor." Dr. Daniel Reyes was a forensic audio analyst she'd worked with on a podcast series 2 years ago. Someone who could pull meaning out of noise, find patterns in chaos. "I recorded something," she said quietly. "Something I shouldn't have been able to. Bring it to the lab," he said after a pause. "I'll cancel my plans. Sounds like you found a ghost." When she arrived at his university office, the air smelled of solar and coffee. Cables wound across the floor like vines. Daniel sat behind his desk, surrounded by waveforms glowing on twin monitors. He took the recorder from her, plugged it in, and scrubbed through the file. "Let's hear what you've got." The tunnel's ambient hum filled the speakers, low and throaty. Then the metallic clanging. 3 beats. Pause. 3. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "That's not random." "What do you mean?" "Regular interval. Consistent amplitude could be mechanical. But there's modulation. Listen again." He filtered the background, isolating the lower frequencies. The sound resolved into a rhythm, closer to breathing than machinery. Then came the voice. "Harrow, Open it. Daniel leaned closer. That's human, but degraded, like it's been replayed through multiple mediums. Where was this recorded? She hesitated. Inside a sealed tunnel. There shouldn't have been anyone there. He frowned, looping the clip again, slowing it by half. There's a second layer under the speech, something subharmonic. Watch. On the screen, a faint waveform flickered beneath the audible range. He amplified it, and the speakers exhaled a low, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate the floor. Jesus, he muttered. That's below 20 hertz. Infrasound. You wouldn't hear it, but you'd feel it. Makes people nauseous, anxious, sometimes hallucinate. You sure the tunnel wasn't vibrating from trucks or wind? It was dead still, she said, and it didn't feel external. It felt alive. Daniel ran another filter. This time, the low tone began to pulse in distinct bursts. He counted under his breath. 12, 12, 12. And then, a break. What's that number? Could be signaling, he said, or it might correspond to time intervals, 12 pulses every 60 seconds. Midnight, Lena whispered. Daniel looked at her sharply. What did you say? Nothing, just keep going. He isolated one of the pulses and visualized it as a waveform. The pattern resembled an oscillating heartbeat, then fractured, splitting into 4 peaks. 4, he said quietly, repeating, like a signature. Lena's throat tightened. 4 officers, the ones who vanished. He leaned back, uneasy now. You think this is them? I don't know what to think. They sat in silence as the file reached its end. Static swallowed the room until, right before the cutoff, something else whispered through the noise. River bends. Daniel froze. That wasn't part of the earlier section. She nodded, remembering the Army report. River Bend Tunnel. When the file ended, the monitors went black for half a second before rebooting themselves. Daniel frowned. That's never happened. Maybe just a surge. But in the black screen's reflection, for the briefest moment, Lena saw movement behind her, a man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, hat tilted low, standing in the doorway. She turned. The hallway was empty. Daniel rubbed his temples. Whatever's on that tape, it's not just environmental noise. You might have stumbled onto some kind of frequency phenomenon. Subsonic waves can trigger hallucinations, memory recall. Sometimes whole groups start seeing and feeling the same thing, like it's a sound-borne infection. I'm not hallucinating. He held up a hand. I'm not saying you are. But the body reacts to those frequencies. Maybe whoever built that tunnel used sound intentionally. Control, deterrence, something military. Or something worse, she said softly. They backed up the files onto an encrypted drive. Daniel offered her a tired smile. Whatever this is, promise me you won't go down there again alone. She pocketed the drive. I won't. But she knew she would outside. Dusk pressed low over the campus. The sky looked bruised, and the first drops of rain darkened the pavement. She unlocked her car inside. The recorder blinked red again, even though it was powered off. The small screen displayed a single word: bend. The next morning, the storm had passed, but left the air trembling with humidity. Every surface beaded with water as if the world were sweating. Lena packed before sunrise. The drive back to Harper County took 3 hours. The roads glistened, and the landscape rolled past in a blur of pale gold and green. She kept the recorder locked in the glove compartment. It hadn't stopped flickering through the night. The word bend pulsing in and out like a heartbeat. The map from the mission still haunted her thoughts. The line of the river curling east before vanishing under the ridge. The bend. She followed the county road until it broke into gravel, then into dirt. When she finally reached the curve of the river, the land fell away sharply, revealing a shallow basin of stone and reeds. There, at the edge of the water, A rusted length of rail jutted from the ground. It pointed downstream like an arrow. Lena climbed down, boots slipping in the mud. The river ran narrow here, its current sluggish, curling against the rock wall before disappearing into a deep, black pool. The air smelled of iron and rain. She crouched and dipped a hand into the water. It was colder than it should have been. When she withdrew it, a thin trace of oil shimmered on her skin. Something was leaking up from below. She took out her phone and photographed the pool, zooming in until she saw shapes beneath the surface. Geometric, man-made rivets. A curve of metal. A roof. The train. Her breath caught. The entire river bend was its grave. She stepped closer, boots sinking, until she could see the faint outline of a carriage door beneath the murky light. Inside the reflection, movement stirred. Just a flicker. The illusion of a hand pressed against glass. Lena froze. The air grew still. No sound but the trickle of the current and her pulse in her ears. Then a whisper, low and unmistakable, rippled through the reeds. Harrow. She spun. No one there, only the wind bending the tall grass. She turned back toward the water, but the image was gone. The surface lay still, dark and impenetrable. Her rational mind scrambled for explanation. Gas pockets, reflection, fatigue. But the part of her that had been inside the tunnel knew better. This was where they'd been swallowed. She pulled a metal probe from her pack, a surveying rod she'd borrowed from Daniel's lab, and eased it into the water. It struck metal almost immediately. She pressed harder. The sound that answered was hollow, resonant. A sealed chamber. "Jesus," she murmured, "it's all still here." The recorder in her pocket activated on its own. A faint hiss rose, then the deep pulse Daniel had isolated earlier, the infrasonic beat, the same pattern, 12 pulses, then a break. Her vision swam, the air thickened. The river's reflection twisted into an impossible shape, a tunnel opening downward, not under the ridge but beneath her feet. She staggered back, gasping. The world tilted. When she blinked, the illusion snapped away, leaving only water. She knelt, shaking, and pulled out the badge from her pocket. "Raymond Cobb," she whispered. "If you're down there, if any of you are, what do you want me to find?" The recorder hissed. Then, through the static, came a single word: open. Lena looked toward the far bank, where the ridge rose like a scar. Somewhere inside that hill, a door waited. She climbed back up to the car and marked the coordinates on her map. As she folded the paper, the corner caught her eye. An ink note she hadn't seen before, faint but legible. Tunnel 3B, terminus beneath River Bend Bio-Cargo Containment. She remembered Daniel's words. Subsonic control. But control of what? Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number again. 12 a.m. Riverbend. Come alone. The time, the phrase, the impossible summons. She stared at the message until her reflection darkened in the glass. Then she whispered the phrase she had heard since the first night, almost as if testing it against the air. Not yet midnight. The phone flickered and went black. The road to Riverbend lay deserted beneath a waning moon. The asphalt shimmered faintly with mist, and every mile marker she passed seemed to echo the same rhythm. 3. Pause. 3. Lena drove with her headlights off for part of the way, guided only by the faint silver of moonlight on the river. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. By the time she reached the ridge, the world had gone utterly still. No insects, no wind. Only the slow hush of water turning through the bend. She parked behind a stand of willows, killed the engine, and stepped out. The night air pressed close, damp and electric. Her flashlight beam swept across the riverbank, catching the gleam of metal where she'd left the probe earlier. The surface of the pool reflected the sky perfectly, an unbroken mirror. She crouched and set up her recorder on a flat stone. Its red light blinked to life. Riverbend. She whispered into the mic. Local time? Her voice broke off. The air changed. A vibration rolled through the ground beneath her boots, a deep, thrumming pulse that came not from the sky but from below. The same pattern. 12 beats. Break. 12 again. She pressed a hand to the earth. It was warm. The recorder began picking up new sound, low static interlaced with something rhythmic, mechanical. Then, beneath it, the faint chime of a whistle. Woo! The noise rose, gathering texture, turning into a full, mournful cry. The whistle of a train. Lena stared at the water. The reflection shifted. The river no longer mirrored the sky. It rippled with light from below, red and gold, like furnace glow behind glass. She took a step back. Another. Then the water bulged upward, as though something beneath it had exhaled. Steam curled off the surface, carrying the smell of rust and rot. And then, through the mist, she saw it. A fragment of curved metal breaking the waterline. The top of a train car, paint long gone, windows blackened. Inside one of those windows, light flickered. She raised her flashlight, trembling. Shapes moved behind the glass. 4 shadows standing shoulder to shoulder, unmoving. Walter, she whispered. Raymond, Ira, Harrow. The recorder hissed louder. Voices bled through the static, overlapping, dissonant, desperate, still inside. Help us! The door won't open. Then, a single voice cut through them all. Calm, commanding. Dr. Rourke. Lena froze, her name spoken clearly, as if the speaker stood right beside her. She turned slowly, but the riverbank was empty. Only mist, water, and that faint light flickering under the surface. The train groaned. Metal flexed. The air filled with the deep, animal sound of pressure releasing after too long. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but curiosity, obsession, anchored her in place. She stepped closer until the water lapped at her boots. The whistle sounded again, this time behind her, impossibly distant and deafening all at once. Lightning flared across the horizon, illuminating the ridge in a single white flash. For a moment, the world held still. Then the badge in her pocket grew searing hot. She pulled it free. Its edges glowed faintly, symbols rising to the surface. Letters she hadn't noticed before. Midnight access. 3B. The storm broke. Rain fell in sudden sheets, drumming on the river. The light beneath the water dimmed, then died. Lena collapsed to her knees, drenched and shaking. The recorder sputtered, its red light flickering weakly. Then it went dark. The clock on her phone blinked 12 a.m. and froze there. No matter how many times she reset it later, it would never move past that moment. The next morning, Harper County looked scrubbed clean by the storm. Puddles mirrored the sky, and mist clung low over the valley. Lena woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. Dozens of missed calls from Daniel. She answered, voice raw. I'm here. Where have you been? He said. I've been trying all night. The drive you left me with. Lena, something's wrong with the data. What do you mean? It keeps rewriting itself every time I open the waveform. It shifts, like it's still recording. The last one I played, there was something new. Her pulse quickened. What? A voice, yours, but saying things you didn't record. Play it. He hesitated, then held his phone up to the speaker. Static filled the line, then her own voice. Calm, distant. Access point 3B confirmed. Coordinates beneath ridge, biocargo intact. Then silence. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles blanched. That's not me? I know, but it's in your vocal range, your cadence. I checked the spectrogram. Whoever made this knew how to mimic your signal. The room seemed to shrink around her. The badge lay on the nightstand, faint scorch marks still visible along its rim. "Daniel," she said softly, "what's the last timestamp on the file?" "Exactly midnight." She closed her eyes. "I'm going back out there." "Lena, don't. Whatever's in that place, it's not done with you." She hung up. Outside, the air smelled of wet cedar and diesel from distant trucks. She packed her gear, grabbed the badge, and drove back toward the ridge. The road was half washed out, forcing her to stop a mile from the river. She walked the rest of the way, mud sucking at her boots. When she reached the pool, the water had receded several feet, revealing jagged metal along the inner curve of the bend. A section of the train's roof had caved in, forming a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. She set her recorder on, the red light blinking steadily. "I'm standing at Riverbend," she said quietly. "Surface subsidence has exposed structural material, possibly the upper carriage of the 1918 transport." She touched the badge to the metal rim. A sound vibrated through the hull, low, harmonic, almost a chord. Then, with a sharp hiss, a seam in the steel shifted. A door panel slid inward. Water gushed out around her boots, carrying a stench of decay and ozone. She swallowed hard, raised her flashlight, and stepped inside. The interior was a corridor of shadows and rust, air thick with the sweet rot of old formaldehyde. Her light swept across rows of steel crates strapped to the floor with corroded chains. Each crate bore the same stencil, Biocargo 3B, Contagion Containment. Her stomach tightened. The words containment and biocargo echoed Harrow's final journal entry. She approached the nearest crate. Its lid had warped open slightly, revealing glass cylinders inside, cracked, empty, but lined with residue the color of dried blood. Something hissed behind her. She turned. Steam vented from a broken pipe. Then a voice came from deeper in the car. "Sheriff Harrow to base. We've breached containment. I repeat, breach confirmed." The voice crackled, warped by age but unmistakably human. "Who's there?" she called. No answer. Only the echo of dripping water and the faint creak of metal under strain. She followed the sound to the far end of the carriage, where a sealed door stood half submerged. The surface bore a handprint, 5 dark smears that hadn't yet faded. Her flashlight flickered. The recorder sputtered to life again, picking up a new voice, softer this time, not yet midnight. The badge in her hand vibrated. She looked down. Its engraving had changed again, letters rearranging in faint light. Door release. Active. The seam in the door began to shift, slow and grinding. A flood of cold air surged through the cabin. Behind it, she heard the unmistakable shuffle of movement, footsteps on wet steel. She raised her light toward the sound. 4 silhouettes stood beyond the opening. Not solid, not entirely human. Their outlines shimmered like reflections in disturbed water. One stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, his badge gleaming faintly. "Sheriff Harrow," she whispered. He lifted his head. His eyes were hollow sockets filled with faint red light. "You opened it," he said. His voice carried both gratitude and accusation. The others stood behind him, silent, the shape of their uniforms still clinging to the shadows. "What happened to you?" she managed. Harrow tilted his head slightly. "We did our duty. We sealed it in. But duty doesn't die, Doctor. It waits." He reached out a gloved hand. "Come see what we kept from the world." The corridor lights flickered, lights that shouldn't have had power for a century. And somewhere in the distance, deeper within the train, something began to stir. For a heartbeat, Lena couldn't move. The shapes of the men flickered in the half-light, more outline than flesh, uniforms glimmering with the dull sheen of drowned fabric. Then the tunnel behind them exhaled. The air reeked of old iron and sickness. She forced herself forward a single step. "What did you seal in here?" Sheriff Harrow's gaze did not leave her. Not what, who. He turned, and the four figures began to walk deeper into the train. Each step left a wet mark that evaporated almost instantly. Lena followed, her flashlight trembling in her hand. The car groaned around them. Rivets creaked as though remembering pain. The passage opened into a compartment larger than any she'd seen before. Walls lined with glass cells stretched into the dark, some shattered, others still intact. Within the intact ones, silhouettes floated in a cloudy suspension, bodies preserved by a century of cold water. She pressed her palm to the glass. The form inside wore a medic's coat, insignia of the U.S. Army stitched across the shoulder. His face was half-eaten by shadow, but his mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. Harrow's voice drifted behind her. They called it Containment Line 3B, experimental inoculant transport, the first of its kind. The Army wanted to carry the fever itself in order to study it. He looked down at his hands, or the memory of them. But something went wrong. The vials broke. The doctor tried to burn the car to stop the spread. The fire only fed it. We sealed the doors and rode it into the river. Lena's stomach turned. You buried yourselves to stop the infection. He nodded once. And now you've opened the door. A hiss filled the room. The water around the floor began to shimmer, forming a thin mist that climbed the walls. The light from her torch bent, refracted, became strange. What's happening? Harrow's expression did not change. It remembers the air. The glass beside her cracked. A spiderweb fissure raced across the cell and burst outward, splashing her with cold. Inside, the medic's eyes opened, clouded, unfocused, and his mouth moved soundlessly. Lena stumbled back, slipping in the water. The four officers did not move to help her. They only watched the mist thickened until she could hardly see her hands. In the fog, she heard other voices, hundreds, whispering in fragments, repeating the same word in different tones, inside, inside, inside. She covered her ears. But the sound was in her skull now, vibrating through bone. Harrow's voice cut through the noise. You wanted truth, Doctor. There it is. The truth was never buried. It was quarantined. He pointed toward the far end of the compartment where a steel ladder rose into darkness. If you climb, you'll see what we became custodians of. Her body moved before her mind could argue. She caught the first rung and pulled herself upward. The air grew colder with every step until her breath fogged the beam of her flashlight. At the top, she emerged into the final car. A chamber lined with mirrors bolted to the walls, each one stained and cracked. In the center stood a containment pod made of glass and brass, its interior opaque with frost. She wiped the surface with her sleeve. Inside was a figure, small and terribly still. A child, maybe 8 years old, eyes closed, face peaceful. Tubes coiled from her skin into the base of the pod. A brass plate read, Anna Harrow, Test Subject A. Immunity Trial. Lena's throat closed. Your daughter, she whispered. Below her, Harrow's voice rose again, breaking at the edges. She survived the fever. They said her blood was salvation. I gave her to them. Then I saw what they made her. The floor shook. The mirrors trembled in their frames. In each fractured surface, Lena saw the same reflection. The child opening her eyes, pale blue and bottomless. The pod began to hum. Frost melted away, releasing thin streams of vapor. The temperature dropped further. Harrow shouted from below, "Run!" The hum turned into a roar, a resonance that made the glass quiver. Every mirror flashed, showing not the train but a vast, dark river stretching into infinity. Lena stumbled down the ladder, the air now vibrating like struck metal. The officers were fading, edges dissolving into mist. Harrow caught her gaze one last time. We are the locks, she is the door. The train groaned, a sound like the world cracking open. Then everything went white. Light pressed against her eyelids like a blade. Lena woke lying on her back in cold mud, rain falling steady through a sky turned the color of slate. Her flashlight was gone. The recorder lay beside her, half buried, its red light blinking faintly. For a few long seconds she couldn't remember where she was. Then the sound returned, the deep pulse she had come to dread. 12 beats, break, 12 again. She pushed herself up. The river was gone. Or rather, it had changed. What had once been a narrow bend was now a crater of exposed earth. At its center, the roof of the train had split open like a wound. Steam rose from the gap. "Sheriff?" she called. Her voice came out thin, swallowed by mist. "Harrow?" No answer, only the slow hiss of cooling metal. She climbed down, sliding on the mud, and reached the edge of the breach. Inside, the train lay in ruin. Glass panels shattered, crates overturned. The containment pod in the last car was open, its brass door hanging loose. She shone her phone's light inside, empty. Her breath hitched. The mirrors that had lined the walls were gone. In their place were 4 wet imprints on the metal floor, roughly human, each shaped like a body pressed into steel. She took out her recorder and hit play. Static. Then a faint voice, barely audible. "She's awake." The words were followed by the metallic beat, slow and deliberate. 3. Pause. 3. Lena's reflection flickered on the surface of the water pooled at her feet. Only it didn't move when she did. The child's face appeared behind her in the reflection, eyes wide, mouth closed. Lena turned sharply. Nothing, just steam. Then she heard soft footsteps, light as raindrops. She spun again, light swinging across the wreckage, catching a small figure standing on the far side of the chamber, the girl from the pod. Her skin shone faintly, almost translucent, veins pulsing with a dim blue glow. She looked at Lena with a calm that didn't belong to any child. "Anna," Lena whispered. The girl tilted her head. "You opened the door." Her voice was soft, echoing slightly, as though spoken from far away. Lena swallowed. "I had to know." "Knowing is how it spreads," the child said. "It moves through memory, through sound. That's why they buried it." "What are you?" "I was their cure." A flicker of sadness crossed her face. "But the cure learned to survive without them." The ground trembled. Water surged through the breach, flooding the floor. The 4 imprints in the steel began to shimmer, rising into faint outlines. The deputies reforming, their faces calm and resigned. Harrow's voice came through the mist. "Doctor, you must close it." "How?" she shouted. "Take the badge," he said. "Seal it with the name." Lena pulled the badge from her pocket. The engraving glowed, letters rearranging until they spelled a single word. "Remember the girl." Anna watched her. "If you do, we sleep again. If you don't, we wake." The storm outside intensified. Rain hammered the open hull. Lena knelt, pressed the badge against the metal floor. It burned against her skin, light spreading through the cracks like veins of fire. "Go," Harrow said, his voice fading. "Tell them we kept our word." The train shook violently. Steam poured from the ruptured pipes. The girl's image fractured, splitting into 1,000 shards of light that dissolved into the mist. Then, silence. Lena woke on the riverbank again, dawn spreading across the horizon. The crater was gone. The river ran smooth, unbroken. The badge lay beside her, cool, inert, its letters now worn blank. She stared at it for a long time before tucking it into her pocket. As she walked back toward the road, the sound of a distant whistle drifted through the valley, low, mournful, fading east. Her phone buzzed once. A single message appeared on the screen. "Not yet midnight." She looked toward the river. In the pale morning light, for just an instant, she saw 4 figures on the opposite bank, motionless, watching. Then the mist rose, and they were gone. 32 years later, the boxes arrived at the University of Texas in midsummer. Anonymous, no return address, only a faded label that read, H County Archive Material, Audio Transfer. Graduate assistant Jordan Kell opened them first. Inside were 12 reel-to-reel tapes, each marked in a shaky hand. Field notes, Dr. L. Rourke, Harper County, 2025. She'd never heard the name. A search through faculty directories turned up nothing. Rourke's last publication dated back decades. The project, titled The Vanishing Patrol, had been listed as unpublished. By the second tape, Jordan was no longer certain she wanted to keep listening. The recordings were uneven, sometimes barely audible. Wind, rain, a woman's breathing, then that strange metallic rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 3 occasionally, fragments of voice. Harrow, access point. Bio cargo, still active. Not yet midnight. By tape 6, the speaker's tone had changed. Calm, giving way to fear. Then awe. She described a train buried beneath the river. 4 officers vanished in 1918. A child sealed away as the cure. The last reel ended mid-sentence. The badge burns when I... Then nothing. Jordan cataloged everything, labeled the tapes Rourke Collection, and sent them to digital restoration within a month. Excerpts appeared on social media under the tag #VanishingPatrol. By autumn, a documentary producer reached out to license the material. It's got everything, he told her. Lost cops, government cover-up, haunted train, perfect true crime. She laughed, uneasy. It's not fiction. He smiled. Everything's fiction after 100 years. The restored audio aired on a podcast in November. Millions listened. Listeners reported strange interference. Heartbeats syncing with the rhythm, pets hiding during playback, clocks stopping at 12. The producers blamed compression errors. 2 weeks later, the university's digital server glitched. Every file in the Rourke collection replaced itself with a single audio loop, 6 seconds long. The waveform pulsed at 12 beats per minute. And beneath it, if you turned the volume high enough, you could hear a whistle. Low, mournful, moving east. At dawn the next day, a maintenance crew dredging the Brazos near Harper County pulled something from the mud. A brass sheriff's badge, its letters erased by a time. When the foreman handed it to the sheriff, he noticed faint engraving along the rim, almost invisible. One word, remember. He turned it over, puzzled, and slipped it into an evidence bag. From somewhere downriver, a train sounded a single, distant note. 3 beats. Pause. 3. The sheriff looked toward the misted horizon. It was, he realized, almost midnight.